If you work in a remote or hybrid setting and you feel just disorganized throughout your day, I'm going to give you 3 things that you can control to help you out. Welcome back to the Chasing Greater Vision podcast. I'm your host, Rickey Jasper. Today's episode, we are talking about 3 things that we can better control, especially as a remote worker or especially as a hybrid worker, or really if you're in the corporate landscape. I'm going to give you 3 tips at a high level, then I'll get into it. Number 1, think about what you're thinking about. Number 2, control your emotions. Lock those things in. And number 3, focus on your actions. Now, why this is so important is because when we were going into the office on a consistent basis, you kind of have to keep these things in check because you're seeing people on a day-to-day basis. In the past 10 years of me, 10 plus years of me being an IT professional, I have been remote for about 8 or 9 of those years, if you believe it or not. And what that has made me realize is the fact that what I think about, my emotions and my actions, those things just kind of atrophy. They kind of fall by the wayside because I'm not focusing on the right things because I don't really have to. I don't have people around me. I'm not responding emotionally the right way because I can turn my camera off. I can go on mute and I can just say what I want to say and lash out. And I'm not also just acting and doing the right things because I'm just distracted. I have so much time and I just have so much, I can slough off everything. So the goal is for this podcast is to allow us to take some control back to our day, to add some organization back to our day so we can reduce the anxiety, so we can reduce the stress, and so that we can be more productive and so that we can give time and have time to do other things outside of just our job that we really love doing. So we're going to get into it right now. So number 1 is think about what you're thinking about. So what I got on a kick doing, I say got on a kick, I've been doing this for years, is I love listening to podcasts, probably why I love, having a podcast. But in the morning, what I intake in the morning and the first hour of my morning is very important. That's why I typically don't have my phone on for the first 30 minutes, right? And when I get to the gym or when I'm like preparing for a run, that's when I'll put a podcast on or I'll listen to something. I'm not listening to music and I'm not listening to any sort of I love comedy podcasts. I love other things that are just kind of reckless podcasts that are fun podcasts, but I'm typically listening to a podcast or like watching a vlog of something that is intellectual, that makes me think, that is not getting me hyped up. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm setting the tone for what's coming into my mind and I'm setting the tone for what I want to output throughout the day, right? Because if I start with something that is funny or whatever, it almost feels like I'm starting the day where I'm just distracting myself. And then when I go throughout my day and I work fully remote, then it's like, well, now it's easy because now when before I get a break, I just want to distract myself. So I'm already in distraction mode as soon as I wake up and get going. So my biggest suggestion is first, turn the phone off, keep the phone off for the first 15 to 30 minutes. And then 2, when you do start to intake content that is important or that grows you. And then the last thing, when I also do turn my phone on, I still have all of my work apps blocked until about 7:45 a.m. Now, I'm an early riser, but also what that does for me is that makes sure that I am being intentional about what I want to do from 5 a.m. to almost 8 a.m. I have 3 hours of uninterrupted work. Nobody's bothering me. And even if they are, I cannot be bothered because that's the boundaries that I've set up for work. Now, the thinking about what you're thinking about as we go through our day, we're always going to have thoughts that are just going to annoy us, that are just going to, be intrusive thoughts, but that's what you want to think about, right? So when they come in, think about the fact that you're thinking about them and allow them to pass, right? Because we don't want that to end up just pushing our actions and making us do things that we really don't want to do. I think one of the things that is so important that I've learned so much is the more I can be present and the more that I can really be intentional about thinking about what I'm thinking about, the more that I can think about different things that change into different actions. Your thoughts will typically lead to actions. Now, not every thought is something that we control, but if we let them just run rampant and it controls us, then it will ultimately control our actions, which is something that we don't want to do. And if you're someone who works remote, that you want to be successful in your career and you want to have time to do other things and be successful at other things, you really want to think about what you're thinking about. Number 2, control your emotions. I'm an emotional person. If there's something that just bothers me, you'll see it on my face. I will talk about it ad nauseum. I love talking. I basically talk for a living. I will talk about it. I will complain about it. It will be all there until I feel like I've gotten it all out. And then I'm like, I still need to talk about it. But what happens is that makes me even more mad, makes me even more frustrated, because as I'm talking, I'm listening to myself talk, right? And so what that does is it just perpetuates a cycle. Last year, well, I guess in 2022, Carly and I went to couples therapy, and it was great because I was going through a lot mentally. And that was one of the things I realized that, okay, like I have some things that were triggers, and it was stuff that like I kind of hadn't dealt with. And then I would just allow my emotions to go, and then I talk, and then I complain. I hear myself talk and complain. I'd be more upset. And it was just something that kept going. And what I realized was I wasn't creating space for reaction. Now, when you're remote, when you're working, when you are busy, a lot of things can, one, be triggering. A lot of things can almost be sore subjects, not because they are on the, how do I put this? Not because they are per se, but it's because there's so many other things that we're dealing with, that we're managing, that if one more thing is added, if one more person says something to us the wrong way, it triggers something and then it spirals, right? That's going to happen. So from an emotional standpoint, identify the areas that trigger you. Identify the areas that you're like, oh, this is typically a hot button for me. And then make a vow. I say make a vow, but really practice on allowing space before responding to that trigger. You can always respond to it. If there's a difficult conversation, if there's something that you know you need to get to, if there's whatever, you can always respond to it. But typically our responses in the moment lead us down a path of areas where it cuts off opportunities. It doesn't allow us to be our best self. It doesn't allow us to respond in a way that puts us in the best light, right? So if we respond in a way that's not correct, and then when the dust settles, what happens? We become more anxious. We become more fearful about whatever work situation, whatever relationship situation, whatever home or lifestyle situation. We don't want to be more anxious. Like I said, the goal of this podcast is to get control of the things that you typically don't think about, to really think about them, and to be intentional with your actions to relieve anxiety, to relieve stress, to relieve pressure, so you can get your life back, so you can get back in control of what you can control. Can't control everything, but what you can control, right? So create space. In this position I'm currently in, like sometimes I have to have difficult conversations. And with that being said, it is an area where I am typically very reactionary. I love to compete. Like when I tell you like I'm about it, I'm ready. But there's a time and place for everything. And when having difficult conversations, and when being professional, and when trying to especially do it when sometimes somebody's camera's off, or you don't have that body language, you don't have that rapport because you've never even met the person, you have to come at it with a level of creating space and being prepared. From an emotional standpoint, sometimes we know how the day is going to go. Sometimes we know what meetings that are going to come up. Sometimes we know from a relationship standpoint, like, what might happen on a certain day. But being prepared and creating space already so you can go into any sort of thing that could cause you to be very emotional, that is going to help you ease the emotions off and respond in a way that is productive, right? So from an emotional standpoint, identify your triggers, create space, and then respond in a way that reduces the anxiety, that reduces the fear, that puts you in the best light to succeed, and that puts you in the best light to be productive. Number 3, your actions. Now, I always talk about actions because at the end of the day, it's like Marshawn Lynch said, I believe he said it, I'm about that action. Actions, we can think about stuff, we can whatever, talk about it, but when it comes down to it, if we are not taking action on something, then we're just thinking and talking about something. This year, again, my goal is to act in a way that reduces stress, reduces anxiety, and that's productive. So how are you showing up? Now, again, this conversation, I believe, is kind of geared more towards work standpoint, because most of us, if you're watching this, we're working in some sort of corporate aspect. I know for me, I'm an IT person. So if you're watching, you might be in IT. So we're typically working in a remote landscape. How are we showing up, right? What I realize and what I've started doing is, and this is it makes me feel better, is when I come to work in my office, I work fully remote. I now start putting a collared shirt on, a polo. I would just put t-shirts on and just kind of come in here because people can't see me. I'll keep my camera off or I'll keep it on, but team's a team. Like, hey, we feel like we're all family. It's good. But I started wearing polos because I was like, wait, I want to show up a little bit better. And it has nothing to do with the actual work at hand. It has everything to do with how I feel and the pride I take in what I'm doing, right? So ask yourself, how are you showing up? Second thing is ask yourself, are you giving your best effort? And this is an action thing. And this is also with everything, right? This is in your relationship. This is within your job. This is within, I always say this, any silo of life. Are you giving the best effort that you can? If you're going to show up somewhere, and you care to show up, care to give your best effort. Because my thing is like, if I'm not going to give my best, I'm not even going to waste time being there. If I'm not going to give my best to my relationship, I don't need to be in it. If I'm not going to give my best to my job, I don't need to be there. If I'm not going to give my best to this podcast, we don't need to do it. Because at the end of the day, the results are going to be a byproduct of what I give. And the results aren't guaranteed. Results are guaranteed if I don't give my best. But if I give my best, then I can potentially get great results. I might not always, but I can potentially get great results. But if I don't, then I'm pretty much guaranteed that I'm not going to get great results. And if I want great results and I'm just not giving my best, there's no point in me being there, right? Last thing about this is understand the downstream impacts of your actions. This is something I really had to learn, probably the hard way. When you act in a certain way, or when you come off a certain way, and this is relationally and this is job-wise, when you come off or act in a certain way to your partner, to your spouse, to your manager, to your teams that you manage, it has downstream impacts that you don't see on the surface, right? People can lose trust in you. People can have a negative image of you. You can lose out on opportunities, and all of these things might be under the surface that you don't see. And what happens is down the road, when you're expecting something good to happen, they point back and they say, well, the way in which you acted or consistently act had all these downstream impacts. And here's the conclusion that we've come to, right? Vice versa. You act in a way that helps people reduce stress, become less anxious, and that's productive. You're going to see the good downstream positive impacts or upstream positive impacts that happen, right? And it's an action thing. This is something that is within your control. So with the actions that you consistently take, I want you to take inventory of the impacts. We take actions all the time. For me, I now like to run. I like to functional train. There are downstream impacts of that. I feel better throughout my day. If I feel better throughout my day, I show up better in my household, to my fiance. I show up better to my job. I have a whole lot more energy. I can give more to the things that I'm working on, the different IT programs and things that I'm working on releasing and everything. These are the impacts. If I don't show up and I don't take those positive actions, then all of that is the opposite. I'm not great at home, right? I am tired and sluggish, doing work stuff. I typically don't get to the stuff that I love and the passions because I'm just like, I'm tired. I want to sit on the couch and I just want the day to be over so I can start a new day. All of this first is think about what you're thinking about. What you're thinking about is vital, and it typically is a byproduct of what you're intaking and when you're intaking it. If you're intaking negative things early or you're intaking things that are not productive early, it's going to set the tone for your day, and you're going to automatically just consistently be on a path where you're thinking about stuff that just doesn't matter, that doesn't move the needle forward. Number 2 is get your emotions in check. Sometimes things are just going to happen that are going to cause us to be emotional, but what we can do is we can control the way in which we respond to our emotions. We can control the space in between from an emotional trigger, the space in between, and then how we respond and make sure we're responding the right way. Number 3, focus on our actions and act in a positive way. Number 3, focus on our actions and act in a positive way that helps the downstream impacts of how we're acting. Identify the actions that you're taking on a consistent basis. Identify who is, a receiver of those actions or who is, a part of those actions and how that could potentially impact them, right? And so if you're consistently acting in a wrong way, change those, and you'll see the trajectory of your day. You'll see the trajectory of your team. You'll see the trajectory of your life change. And it's all by little minuscule actions on a day-to-day basis. Our word of the day is different. Now, why is it different? Is because we are going to go about things differently. Two of the three things are kind of within us. What we're thinking about and our emotions kind of overall. Those are the things that we are going to process differently. And then the third thing is our actions. We are going to take different actions so that we can be a better person, so we can show up, so we can control these things a little bit better. Now, not everything is going to be in our control, but we're going to control the controllables. We're going to do the things that we can do. And again, if you're watching this episode, you're probably somebody who works in some sort of corporate environment, some sort of remote landscape. And these things are things that can just escape us, because when you're working remote and you don't have to interface or engage with somebody on a consistent basis, these things can go by the wayside. So we're going to get these things back on track, and I will see you in the next episode. Peace. Thank you so much for watching this video. We have clips and content coming out every single week, full videos on Thursdays, and clips coming out almost every single day. You can subscribe to this channel if you like it. Also, please send it to somebody who you know needs this message or any message that you see, and we will see you in the next video.